The gallery buzzed with the refined murmur of wealth and culture, champagne flutes catching light from crystal chandeliers as guests circulated between marble sculptures and Renaissance paintings. I smoothed down my navy cocktail dress, conscious of the unfamiliar weight of borrowed jewelry at my throat, and tried not to feel like an imposter among Milan's elite. "Mia, over here." Marco's voice cut through the sophisticated din, his familiar grin a welcome anchor in this sea of strangers. My cousin waved from beside a Caravaggio, his tailored suit somehow making him look both entirely comfortable and delightfully irreverent in this temple of high art. I wove through the crowd toward him, grateful for a friendly face. 8 months as Enzo Lombardi's personal assistant had brought me to many such events, always hovering at the periphery, never quite part of the glittering world I now orbited. Tonight was different. Enzo had business in Rome, leaving me to represent his interests at this charity auction supporting art restoration. The responsibility sat heavy on my shoulders, but the temporary freedom felt intoxicating. "You look like you're at a funeral, not a party," Marco teased, pulling me into a quick hug. "Relax. These people don't bite. Well, most of them don't." "Easy for you to say," I muttered. "You thrive in places like this." "I'm just trying not to accidentally insult someone important or bid on something worth more than my yearly salary." Marco laughed, the sound warm and familiar. At 26, he'd already established himself as a sought-after interior designer among Milan's wealthy set, his natural charm opening doors that remained firmly closed to others. His dark eyes sparkled with mischief as he assessed me critically. "You need to own it more, cousin. You work for Enzo Lombardi. Do you have any idea how many people in this room would kill for 5 minutes of his time? You have direct access. That makes you powerful by proxy." I shook my head, uncomfortable with the implication. "I'm his assistant, Marco. I manage his calendar and handle correspondence. That's hardly powerful." "Mia, sweet, naive Mia." Marco slung an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "You underestimate yourself, as usual." A nearby photographer snapped our picture, the flash momentarily blinding. Marco grinned at the camera, perfectly at ease, while I blinked in surprise. The photographer moved on, already hunting his next shot. "That was unexpected," I said, watching him disappear into the crowd. "Social pages," Marco explained. "Every charity event has one. Your boss will probably see it in tomorrow's paper. Speaking of which, how is the mysterious Signor Lombardi? Still all brooding intensity and perfectly tailored suits?" Heat crept up my neck at the question. "He's fine, professional, busy." Marco's knowing look made me want to sink through the floor. "Uh-huh. And you're still pretending you don't feel anything when he's around?" "I don't know what you're talking about," I said too quickly. "Right. And I'm straight." Marco rolled his eyes. "Come on, Mia. I've seen the way your voice changes when you talk about him, the way you light up when he actually notices something you've done. You're falling for him." "I am not," I protested, but my voice lacked conviction. "It's completely inappropriate. He's my employer. He's 12 years older than me. And he's gorgeous, powerful, mysterious," Marco supplied helpfully. "Successful beyond measure, protective of you in ways that make me think he feels something too." I pulled away from his embrace, needing space. Enzo doesn't see me that way. To him, I'm just efficient, reliable, invisible. "If you say so," Marco's tone suggested he knew better. "But for what it's worth, invisible women don't get Cartier jewelry for their birthdays." "That was a professional gift," I said firmly, touching the delicate bracelet that had appeared on my desk 3 months ago, with a card in Enzo's precise handwriting. "For your continued excellence." I'd worn it every day since, unable to resist the foolish hope that it meant something more than employer appreciation. The auction began shortly after, and I dutifully fulfilled my role, noting which pieces garnered the most interest, and who was bidding against whom. Enzo had taught me to observe, to catalog details that might prove useful later. His business dealt in rare artifacts and antiquities, operating in the gray spaces where legitimate markets and private collectors intersected. I didn't ask too many questions about his sources or methods. Some things were safer not knowing. By the time the event wound down, my feet ached from hours in heels, and my professional smile felt painted on. Marco had left an hour earlier, air-kissing my cheeks and promising to text. I gathered my clutch and wrap, ready to escape into the cool Milan night. My phone buzzed as I stepped onto the street, a notification from Instagram. Marco had tagged me in the photo from earlier, the one with his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling at the camera. His caption read, "Best dates are with family. Love you, cousin. Milan nights. Art for good." I smiled at the sweet sentiment and liked the post without thinking, already flagging down a taxi. The phone rang 3 seconds later. Enzo's name flashed on the screen, and my stomach did that stupid fluttering thing it always did when he called. I took a breath, composing myself before answering. "Good evening, Mr. Lombardi. Is everything all right? It's quite late." "Delete that photo." His voice was quiet, controlled, but something underneath made the hair on my arms stand up. "Now." I froze, one hand on the taxi door. "I'm sorry. What?" "The photograph on your Instagram. Delete it. Immediately." Heat flooded through me, part confusion, part inexplicable defiance. In 8 months, Enzo had never spoken to me like this, never issued commands about my personal life. The boundary between professional and personal had always been carefully maintained, a wall we both respected. "May I ask why?" I kept my voice level, professional, even as something hot and reckless unfurled in my chest. Silence stretched between us, taut and humming with something I couldn't name. I could hear his breathing, could almost feel the tension radiating through the phone connection. "Because I'm asking you to." Each word was measured, careful, too careful. The defiance that had been building suddenly crested. Maybe it was the champagne I'd sipped throughout the evening. Maybe it was Marco's teasing about my feelings. Maybe it was 8 months of swallowing every inappropriate thought and emotion I had about my employer. "That's not a reason, Mr. Lombardi." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "That's an order. If you want me to delete it, you'll need to give me a good reason. A real one." The silence that followed was different. Charged. Dangerous. "Mia," he started, then stopped. I heard something rustle, as if he'd moved suddenly. "Who is he?" "Who is who?" "The man in the photograph, with his arm around you." Understanding dawned, swift and startling. "You're calling about Marco?" "I'm calling about the photograph," Enzo corrected, but there was no mistaking the edge in his voice now. "The one where you're pressed against another man, smiling at him like—" He cut himself off abruptly. My heart hammered against my ribs. "Like what?" "Delete it, Mia." Firmer now, that careful control reasserting itself. "Please." The please undid something in me. Enzo Lombardi did not say please. He stated facts, gave instructions, made observations. Politeness was built into his phrasing, but actual pleading? Never. "Give me one good reason," I said again, softer this time. "One real reason why what I post on my personal social media matters to you." The silence stretched so long I thought he might have hung up, then barely above a whisper, "Because it does." The line went dead. I stood on the curb, phone still pressed to my ear, mind reeling. The taxi driver cleared his throat impatiently, and I waved him on, suddenly needing to walk, to process what had just happened. Enzo had seen the photo. Enzo had called immediately. Enzo had asked, no, demanded, that I remove it. And when I'd pushed back, when I'd refused to simply comply, He'd revealed something I'd spent 8 months telling myself I was imagining. He cared. Not as an employer monitoring his employees' social media presence, but as something else. Something that made him call in the middle of the night from Rome. Something that put that dangerous edge in his usually unflappable voice. I pulled up the photo again, studying it with new eyes. Marco and I looked comfortable together, familial affection obvious in our easy poses. To someone who didn't know us, didn't know Marco was gay, didn't know we were cousins, it might look like something else. Might look like I was dating someone. Might look like I belonged to someone else. My finger hovered over the delete button. I lowered the phone without deleting anything. If Enzo wanted the photo gone, he could tell me why. He could admit that the boundaries we'd so carefully maintained were already blurred beyond recognition. He could stop pretending that this was merely professional interest. I walked back to my apartment, mind churning with possibilities and implications. Sleep eluded me that night, and every time I checked my phone, the photo remained, slowly accumulating likes and comments. None from Enzo's account, of course. He didn't do social media. But I knew he was watching. The next morning, I arrived at the office early, as always. The top floor of the converted Renaissance palazzo served as Enzo's headquarters, all exposed brick and modern glass, ancient and contemporary merged seamlessly. Usually the space felt like sanctuary. Today it felt like a trap. Enzo was already there, which surprised me. He wasn't due back from Rome until afternoon. He stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Duomo, his back to me, hands in the pockets of his perfectly tailored charcoal trousers. Even from behind, everything about him spoke of controlled power, of coiled strength held in check. "Good morning, Mr. Lombardi." I set my bag down at my desk, proud of how steady my voice sounded. "I wasn't expecting you until later. My business concluded early." He turned, and I fought not to react to the sight of him. At 34, Enzo Lombardi was devastating in ways that made my job both easier and infinitely more difficult. Dark hair swept back from a face all angles and intensity, olive skin, and gray eyes that seemed to see straight through me. This morning, those eyes were carefully blank, his expression giving nothing away. "The auction went well," I said, falling back on professional ground. "I have the full report ready for your review." "Good." He moved toward his office, then paused. "The photograph is still posted." "Yes." I met his gaze directly. "It is." Something flickered across his face, too quick to identify. "I see." He disappeared into his private office, closing the door with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. The rest of the day proceeded with excruciating normalcy. Enzo conducted meetings, reviewed documents, made calls. I managed his schedule, handled correspondence, coordinated with clients and contacts across Europe and beyond. We maintained perfect professional distance, speaking only when necessary, never once acknowledging the phone call from the night before. It was torture. By evening, my nerves were frayed. I'd caught him watching me 3 separate times, but each time his gaze had been inscrutable, giving nothing away. The man who'd called me in the middle of the night, voice rough with something that wasn't quite anger, had disappeared behind the cool professional facade I'd come to know so well. "I'm leaving for the day unless you need anything else," I said at 7, gathering my things. Enzo looked up from his desk, where he'd been reviewing photographs of an illuminated manuscript. Mia. The use of my first name made me pause. At the office, it was always Miss Reyes, or nothing at all. "Yes?" He seemed to war with himself, jaw tightening in that way I'd learned meant he was processing something difficult. Finally, "About last night. My call was inappropriate. I apologize." Disappointment and frustration warred in my chest. "You don't need to apologize for calling me." "I do when I overstep professional boundaries." His voice was carefully neutral. "Your personal life is your own. I had no right to comment on it. And if I didn't mind," the words escaped before I could stop them. If I didn't mind you commenting on my personal life? Enzo's hand stilled on the manuscript. Mia? The man in the photo is my cousin Marco, I said, the words tumbling out in a rush. He's gay. We've been best friends since childhood. That photo was completely innocent. I watched the information land, watched him process it. His expression remained neutral, but his knuckles whitened where they gripped the edge of his desk. I see. 2 words, carefully measured. Do you? I challenged, emboldened by his lack of reaction. Do you see, Mr. Lombardi? His eyes met mine, and for just a moment, the mask slipped. What I saw there stole my breath, heat and hunger, and something that looked almost like pain. Then it was gone, shuttered behind professional courtesy. Thank you for clarifying, he said formally. Have a good evening, Miss Reyes. Dismissed. Just like that. I left without another word, frustration and confusion churning in my stomach. What did he want from me? What did I want from him? The questions followed me home, unanswered and unanswerable. The next morning, a small velvet box sat centered on my desk. My hands trembled slightly as I opened it. Inside, nestled on black silk, was a delicate gold necklace. The pendant was an antique cameo, exquisitely carved, the profile of a woman in ivory against a backdrop of honey-colored stone. It was beautiful, breathtaking, and absolutely inappropriate for an employer to give his assistant. A card accompanied it, heavy cream cardstock with Enzo's distinctive handwriting. For you. So you'll never need another shoulder in photographs. E.L. I stood frozen, the necklace in my hands, reading and rereading those careful words. The implication was clear, wasn't it? The possessiveness barely contained beneath proper phrasing. Do you like it? I spun to find Enzo in the doorway of his office, watching me with unreadable gray eyes. It's beautiful, I managed. But I can't accept this. It's too much. It's a 16th century piece, he said, moving closer. Venetian. The artisan is unknown, but the quality is exceptional. I acquired it last year, and have been waiting for the right person to appreciate it properly. Enzo. I rarely used his first name, and his eyes darkened at the sound. This isn't appropriate. You're my employer. I'm aware. He stopped an arm's length away, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle and expensive. But you're also more than just my employee, Mia. You must know that by now. My heart hammered against my ribs. What am I then? He reached out slowly, giving me time to pull away. When I didn't, his fingers brushed mine where I held the necklace, the touch sending electricity up my arm. Mine, he said quietly, the word hanging in the air between us like a confession. If you'll allow it. The word hung between us like a physical thing, solid and undeniable. Mine. Not a question, not even really an offer. A statement of fact delivered in Enzo's quiet, controlled voice that somehow made it sound both inevitable and terrifying. Yours, I repeated, testing the word on my tongue. My fingers trembled where they touched his, the velvet box pressing into my palm. What does that mean exactly? Enzo's gray eyes searched my face, and I watched that careful control he wore, like armor crack, just slightly around the edges. It means that the sight of another man's arm around you, even in an innocent photograph, made me lose focus on a €5 million negotiation. It means I took the first flight back from Rome, because the thought of you at that gallery, surrounded by men who might look at you the way I... He stopped abruptly, jaw tightening. It means I haven't been professional about you for quite some time. Mia. The confession landed like a physical blow. 8 months of careful distance, of maintained boundaries, of pretending we were simply employer and employee. All of it had been a carefully constructed lie. One we'd both apparently been living. How long? I whispered. A muscle worked in his jaw. Your first week. You reorganized my entire filing system without asking, correcting inefficiencies no one else had noticed. When I commented on it, you looked me straight in the eye and said, I assumed you hired me to improve things, not maintain mediocrity. No one speaks to me like that. No one challenges me. His fingers tightened slightly on mine. I was fascinated. And then I watched you handle a difficult client with such grace and intelligence that by the end of your first month I knew I was in trouble. My breath caught. 7 months. He'd been feeling this for 7 months while I'd convinced myself I was imagining every heated glance, every unnecessary touch, every moment when his gaze lingered just a fraction too long. Why didn't you say anything? The question came out more accusation than inquiry. Because you deserve better than a man who operates in gray spaces, he said simply. Because you're 22 and brilliant and have your entire life ahead of you. Because getting involved with your employer is complicated at best, destructive at worst. Because... He released my hand, stepping back, that careful mask reasserting itself. Because I'm not certain I can give you what you deserve, Mia. What you need. The withdrawal stung more than I expected. I set the jewelry box down on my desk with deliberate care, my mind racing. This was the moment, I realized. The moment where we either acknowledged what had been building between us for months or retreated behind professional boundaries that would never quite fit the same way again. You don't get to decide what I deserve, I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Or what I need. That's my choice, not yours. Enzo's eyes flashed with something hot and hungry before he controlled it. You should think carefully before making that choice. My world isn't clean, Mia. The business I conduct, the people I deal with. There are reasons I maintain distance. Reasons I keep my personal life completely separate. I know what you do, I said quietly. I've known for months. The antiquities you acquire don't always come through official channels. Some of your clients operate in spaces that make legitimate dealers nervous. You negotiate in ways that don't require contracts or lawyers. I met his gaze directly. I'm not naive, Enzo. I see you. All of you. And I'm still here. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or relief. Most people look away, prefer not to examine too closely. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. The phone on my desk rang, shattering the moment. I answered automatically, falling into professional mode even as my heart raced. A client from Tokyo needed to reschedule a viewing. I handled it efficiently, aware of Enzo watching me the entire time, his expression unreadable. When I hung up, the air between us felt different. Charged still, but with a new understanding threading through the tension. I need you to understand something, Enzo said after a moment. If we cross this line, there's no going back to what we were. The dynamic changes. Everything changes. Maybe it needs to change, I countered. Maybe pretending there's nothing between us is more dangerous than acknowledging it. He studied me for a long moment, and I forced myself to hold his gaze, to not look away from the intensity I found there. Finally, he moved to his office door, pausing in the threshold. Wear the necklace tomorrow, he said, not quite a command, but close. I want to see it on you. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with the velvet box and a heart that wouldn't stop racing. That night, I tried on the necklace 3 times. The antique cameo settled perfectly in the hollow of my throat, the gold chain delicate against my skin. It was beautiful and intimate and felt like a claim. When I finally took it off to sleep, I dreamed of gray eyes and dangerous promises. The next morning, I wore it. Enzo's reaction was subtle but unmistakable. A slight pause when I walked in, his gaze dropping to my throat, something fierce and satisfied flashing across his face before he controlled it. Good morning, Miss Reyes. Good morning, Mr. Lombardi. The formality felt absurd now, a remnant of boundaries we'd already crossed, but neither of us suggested changing it. Not yet. The day proceeded normally until mid-afternoon, when Enzo emerged from a conference call looking distinctly displeased. "We need to attend an event tonight," he said without preamble. "The Santoro Foundation Gala. It's important we make an appearance." I pulled up his calendar. "That's not in your schedule." "Last-minute invitation. Hiroshi Sato will be there." The way he said the name carried weight. He's been attempting to acquire the same Byzantine manuscript I'm negotiating for. His presence at an event I'm known to support suggests he wants to make contact. I recognized the name, a Tokyo-based collector with a reputation for aggressive acquisition tactics. "Do you want me to prepare briefing materials?" "I want you to accompany me." The statement was delivered calmly, but I caught the undertone. As my guest, not my assistant. My pulse kicked up. "Enzo." "It's strategic," he continued, his expression revealing nothing. "Sato is known for bringing companions to business functions. He uses social settings to assess competitors. If I attend alone, it signals weakness. If I bring someone..." He trailed off meaningfully. "It signals that you're not vulnerable to his particular brand of manipulation," I finished, understanding. He apparently likes to use attractive women to distract business rivals during negotiations. Something dangerous flashed in Enzo's eyes. "You've been reading the research files." "I read everything you give me access to." I kept my voice level despite my racing heart. "So, this is purely tactical? You need arm candy to maintain negotiating position? That's not..." He stopped, then started again, carefully. "You would be doing me a significant professional favor, and it would give us an opportunity to navigate this new dynamic between us in a controlled environment. A controlled environment where you can keep an eye on me," I observed, remembering his reaction to the photograph with Marco. "Where no other men can put their arms around me for pictures." His jaw tightened. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." I should have been annoyed by the possessiveness, by the implication of ownership. Instead, I felt something warm and reckless unfurl in my chest. "What should I wear to this controlled environment?" "Something that makes it very clear you're with me." The words came out rougher than he'd probably intended. He cleared his throat. "Something formal. I'll send a car at 7. "You could just pick me up yourself," I suggested, testing the boundaries of this new territory we'd entered. Enzo's eyes met mine, heat flickering in their gray depths. "If I come to your apartment, we won't make it to the gala." The blunt admission stole my breath. He turned and walked back into his office before I could respond, leaving me flushed and flustered at my desk. I spent the rest of the afternoon trying to focus on work and failing spectacularly. My mind kept circling back to his words, to the promise implicit in them. If I come to your apartment, we won't make it to the gala. The implication was clear. Whatever had been building between us for 8 months was reaching a breaking point. At 5, Enzo emerged from his office earlier than usual. "Go home. Take time to prepare. The event is black tie." He hesitated, then added more softly, "And Mia, thank you for agreeing to this." The genuine gratitude in his voice made my chest ache. "It's just a gala, Enzo. It's more than that." His gaze held mine for a moment, that stretched and hummed with unspoken meaning. "We both know it is." I did go home, and I did take time to prepare. The black dress I'd purchased for special occasions hung in my closet, simple but elegant, with a neckline that would showcase Enzo's necklace perfectly. I spent longer than necessary on my hair and makeup, telling myself it was just professional presentation while knowing it was so much more. The car arrived exactly at 7, a sleek Mercedes with a driver I didn't recognize. The ride to the venue gave me time to spiral into second-guessing. What was I doing? Getting involved with my employer was complicated enough, but with someone like Enzo, someone who operated in the shadows, who negotiated in ways that made conventional dealers nervous, it was potentially dangerous. But then I remembered the way he'd looked at me that morning, the careful control cracking to reveal something raw and real underneath. The way he'd said mine like it was both confession and question. The way 7 months of professional distance had apparently been as torturous for him as it had been for me. I was still justifying my decisions when the car pulled up to the venue, a historic palazzo converted into an event space, all marble columns and frescoed ceilings. Guests in evening wear climbed the grand staircase, and I suddenly felt very young and very out of my depth. Then I saw Enzo. He stood at the top of the stairs, hands in his pockets, perfectly at ease in a black tuxedo that looked like it had been created specifically for him. His dark hair was swept back, emphasizing the strong lines of his face, and when his eyes found me climbing toward him, everything else fell away. He descended 2 steps, offering his hand. I took it, and the contact sent electricity racing up my arm. "You look beautiful," he said quietly, his gaze dropping to the necklace at my throat. Something possessive and satisfied flickered across his face. "Perfect." "You clean up fairly well yourself," I managed, trying for levity despite my racing pulse. His mouth curved in a rare smile. "Shall we?" He offered his arm, and I took it, hyper-aware of the solid warmth of him beside me, the subtle scent of his cologne, the way his hand covered mine where it rested in the crook of his elbow. We entered together, and I felt eyes turn toward us, assessing, curious, calculating. Enzo moved through the crowd with easy confidence, nodding to acquaintances, introducing me simply as Miss Reyes, my associate. But the way his hand never left the small of my back told a different story. "Lombardi, I was hoping you'd make an appearance." We turned to find a man in his mid-40s approaching, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. He was handsome in a calculated way, everything about him precisely curated from his custom suit to his artfully styled hair. "Sato," Enzo acknowledged with a slight nod. "I heard you'd be attending tonight. Couldn't miss an opportunity to support such a worthy cause." Hiroshi Sato's gaze slid to me, assessing in a way that made me want to step closer to Enzo. "And who is this lovely creature?" "Mia Reyes," I said before Enzo could respond, extending my hand. "I work with Mr. Lombardi." Sato took my hand, holding it just a fraction longer than necessary. "Fortunate man to have such beautiful assistants. Tell me, Miss Reyes, are you interested in antiquities, or is your interest purely professional?" The innuendo was subtle but unmistakable. I felt Enzo tense beside me, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on my back. "I find the intersection of history and commerce fascinating," I replied smoothly, extracting my hand. "Particularly the ethical considerations involved in private acquisition of cultural artifacts." Sato's smile sharpened. "Ethical considerations? How refreshing." His gaze shifted to Enzo. "We should discuss the Byzantine manuscript. I understand you're pursuing the same piece." "This isn't the venue for business negotiations," Enzo said calmly, but I heard the steel underneath. "Of course not. Though I'd hate for our competing interests to create complications. Perhaps we could find a mutually beneficial arrangement. I'm hosting a private viewing next week in Tokyo. You should attend. Both of you." His smile widened. "I'd be very interested in hearing Miss Reyes's thoughts on ethical acquisition." The challenge was clear. He was testing boundaries, seeing how far he could push before Enzo reacted. "We'll consider it," Enzo said with careful neutrality. "If you'll excuse us, I see someone I need to speak with." He guided me away with a hand at my back that felt more possessive than necessary. When we were out of earshot, I felt the tension radiating from him. "That was illuminating," I murmured. He's attempting to unsettle me by focusing attention on you." Enzo's voice was quiet, controlled, but I heard the edge beneath. "It's a tactic he uses. Find a weakness, exploit it." "And I'm your weakness?" The realization should have worried me. Instead, it sent a thrill through my chest. Enzo stopped, turning to face me fully. We were partially shielded by a marble column, the noise of the party a distant hum. His hand came up to touch the necklace at my throat, fingers brushing my skin. "You're becoming one," he admitted quietly. "Which is why this us is complicated. People like Sato, they notice everything, they use everything, and if they realize that you matter to me..." He trailed off, but the implication was clear. "Then I become a target," I finished. "The way to get to you." "Yes." His thumb traced the line of my collarbone, the touch sending shivers down my spine. "Which is why I should end this before it truly begins. Why I should maintain distance. Why I should..." "But you won't." I looked up at him, seeing the conflict written across his face. "Will you?" His jaw tightened, that careful control warring with something raw. "I should. But no. I won't." The admission hung between us, heavy with implication. Around us, the gala continued. Laughter and music and the clink of champagne glasses. But in our small bubble of space, the world had narrowed to just us, to this moment of truth. "Then we deal with the complications together," I said simply. "As they come." Enzo's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You have no idea what you're agreeing to. So explain it to me. Show me." I touched his chest, feeling his heartbeat strong and steady beneath expensive fabric. "Whatever this is between us, let's stop pretending it doesn't exist." For a moment, I thought he might pull away, might retreat behind those careful walls of professional distance. Then his hand covered mine, pressing it more firmly against his chest. "After tonight," he said quietly. "After we've navigated this particular minefield, we'll talk, really talk, about what this means, what it could become, what I can and cannot offer you." His gray eyes held mine, intense and serious. "But understand, Mia, once we cross this line completely, I won't be able to let you go. It's not in my nature to release what's mine." The possessiveness should have alarmed me. Instead, it felt like coming home. "Then don't," I whispered. Something fierce and hungry flashed in his eyes. Then the mask slid back into place as another couple wandered past, and we were once again just employer and employee attending a charity function. But everything had changed, and there was no going back. The weeks following the gala settled into a new rhythm that felt both natural and impossibly strange. Enzo and I hadn't crossed any final lines, not yet, but the pretense of pure professionalism had dissolved entirely. He touched me more freely now, a hand at my back when we reviewed documents together, fingers brushing mine when passing files, his body angling toward me in meetings as if drawn by magnetic force. The necklace had become my daily uniform, and I caught him looking at it, at me, with an expression that made heat pool low in my stomach. We were dancing around something inevitable, and we both knew it. "Coffee," Enzo said one morning, setting a cup on my desk without looking up from the document he was reading. "2 sugars, light cream, exactly how you take it." I blinked at the offering. In 8 months, he'd never made me coffee. That was my job, anticipating his needs, not the reverse. "You remembered how I take my coffee?" "I remember everything about you." He said it absently, still focused on whatever he was reading, as if the admission wasn't earth-shaking. "The way you tap your pen 3 times before making notes, how you organize files by color and urgency, that you prefer morning meetings because you're sharper before noon. that you bite your lower lip when you're thinking through a problem. I stared at him, the coffee forgotten. Enzo, the Castellani estate appointment is confirmed for Thursday, he continued, finally looking up. Whatever he saw in my face made him pause. What? You remember everything about me, I repeated softly. His expression shifted, becoming almost vulnerable. Is that surprising? I've been watching you for months, Mia, studying you, learning you. He set down the document. It's what I do. When something interests me, I observe until I understand it completely. I'm not an artifact to be catalogued. No. He moved closer, coming around the desk until he stood directly before me. You're infinitely more complicated and more valuable. My breath caught at his proximity, at the heat in his gray eyes. This close, I could see flecks of darker gray in the irises, could smell the subtle cologne he wore, could feel the warmth radiating from him. Enzo, I whispered, not sure what I was asking for. His hand came up, fingers ghosting along my jaw. Soon, he promised quietly. Once the Castellani acquisition closes, once Sato's competing bid is settled, once there are no professional complications that could be used against you. His thumb brushed my lower lip, the touch sending electricity racing through me. I'm trying to protect you, Mia. Even from myself. I don't need protection from you. You might. His hand dropped away, and he stepped back, that careful distance reasserting itself. My world has sharp edges. I need to know I can keep you safe before I pull you fully into it. I wanted to argue, to tell him I could handle whatever came. But the seriousness in his expression stopped me. Whatever he was protecting me from wasn't hypothetical. It was real, concrete, dangerous enough to make a man who clearly wanted me maintain this torturous distance. The Castellani estate, I said instead, falling back on work. What do we need to prepare? Relief and something that might have been gratitude flickered across his face. All the documentation you compiled last month. The family is finally ready to liquidate. If we secure the collection, it will be the most significant acquisition of the year. I threw myself into preparation, grateful for the distraction. The Castellani estate contained Renaissance bronzes, illuminated manuscripts, and a collection of Venetian glass that museums had been trying to acquire for decades. Enzo's client, a private foundation in Switzerland, was prepared to pay whatever it took. Thursday arrived with an autumn chill in the air. Enzo had arranged for us to drive to the estate together, a 2-hour journey into the countryside outside Milan. I dressed carefully in a charcoal suit that was professional yet elegant, the cameo necklace my only jewelry. The car Enzo sent was different from his usual, an armored Mercedes with darkly tinted windows. When I questioned it, he simply said, "Precaution. The collection's value makes certain security measures necessary." He was already in the back seat when I entered, reviewing documents on his tablet. But he looked up immediately, his gaze traveling over me in a way that made me flush. "You look perfect," he said quietly. "Professional but not severe. The Castellanis will appreciate the respect." The drive passed in comfortable silence, broken occasionally by discussions of strategy and valuation. But I was hyper-aware of his presence beside me, the subtle brush of his arm against mine when the car turned, the way his attention kept drifting from his tablet to me. "Are you nervous?" he asked as we neared the estate. "Should I be?" "No. You're excellent at this." He reached over, taking my hand. The gesture was so unexpected, so intimate, that I froze. "But it's a significant negotiation. Your first time being directly involved in an acquisition of this magnitude. You're bringing me as more than just an assistant. It wasn't a question. I'm bringing you as my partner." His fingers tightened on mine. "In every sense that matters professionally. The Castellanis will negotiate with both of us. What you observe, what you notice, it matters." I trust your judgment, Mia. The simple declaration undid something in my chest. Trust from Enzo Lombardi wasn't given lightly. I'd earned it, I realized. Months of proving myself, of demonstrating that I could navigate his world with intelligence and discretion. I won't let you down, I promised. His smile was small but genuine. You never have. The Castellani estate was a sprawling villa built in the 16th century, all stone walls and formal gardens slowly surrendering to autumn. An elderly man in a butler's uniform greeted us at the entrance, leading us through halls lined with portraits of ancestors to a library where the current count waited. Count Castellani was in his 70s, elegant in the way only old European nobility could be, with white hair and sharp eyes that assessed us carefully. Beside him sat a younger man, his grandson perhaps, whose expression was less welcoming. Signor Lombardi, the Count greeted in Italian, rising to shake Enzo's hand. And you must be Miss Reyes, my grandson, Alessandro. I shook hands with both men, noting Alessandro's calculating gaze, the way he studied Enzo with something that looked like distrust. The negotiation began cordially enough. Enzo outlined his client's interest, the Foundation's commitment to preservation and scholarship. I took notes, observing the room's contents, the way Alessandro's expression tightened when certain pieces were mentioned. The Venetian glass collection. Alessandro interrupted during Enzo's presentation. We've received another offer, one that values the pieces significantly higher than your proposal. Enzo's expression didn't change. May I ask who made this offer? Hiroshi Sato. Alessandro smiled thinly. Perhaps you know him. Ice trickled down my spine. Sato had been silent since the gala, but apparently he'd been working behind the scenes, attempting to outmaneuver Enzo by going directly to the cellars. I'm familiar with Signor Sato's methods, Enzo said calmly. His valuations are often optimistic, designed to secure initial agreements that later require significant renegotiation once provenance issues emerge. Are you suggesting provenance problems with our collection? Alessandro's voice hardened. I'm suggesting that Signor Sato's due diligence is sometimes less thorough than it should be. Problems emerge. Acquisitions fall through. Sellers are left in difficult positions. Enzo's tone remained perfectly professional, but I heard the steel underneath. My client's offer is comprehensive and final. No renegotiation. No complications. Count Castellani studied Enzo thoughtfully. You have a reputation for reliability, Signor Lombardi, but Alessandro raises valid concerns. If another buyer is willing to pay more. May I? I interjected softly. Both men turned to me with surprise. Even Enzo looked curious. I pulled out my tablet, accessing the research I'd compiled. I've reviewed Signor Sato's acquisition history over the past 5 years. Of the 43 major purchases he initiated, 12 were delayed by provenance disputes, 7 were ultimately canceled, and 3 resulted in legal action from sellers claiming breach of contract. I met Alessandro's gaze directly. His initial offers are indeed higher. His completion rate is concerning. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. You came prepared to discredit a competitor? I came prepared with facts, I corrected gently. Your family's collection deserves to be properly valued and responsibly placed. If those are your priorities, I can provide documentation supporting every claim I've made. Silence fell over the library. I felt Enzo's gaze on me, could sense his approval even without looking. Count Castellani's expression had shifted from polite interest to genuine attention. I would like to see this documentation, the Count said finally. The next 2 hours were intense. I presented my research while Enzo walked them through the specifics of his client's offer, emphasizing the Foundation's commitment to preservation and access. Alessandro pushed back repeatedly, but each time I had data to counter his concerns. By the time we finished, Count Castellani looked convinced. You make a compelling case, he said, looking between Enzo and me. I will need to discuss this with my family, but I believe your offer better serves our interests long term. We appreciate your consideration, Enzo replied smoothly. Please take whatever time you need. Miss Reyes will ensure you have all supporting documentation. As we prepared to leave, Alessandro pulled Enzo aside. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Alessandro's expression, frustrated, perhaps angry. When Enzo returned to me, his face was carefully neutral. What was that about? I asked once we were in the car. A warning. Enzo's jaw tightened. Alessandro has financial troubles. Sato apparently offered him a private incentive, cash payment in addition to the sale price. He's angry that his grandfather might choose our offer instead. Will that be a problem? It could be. He was quiet for a moment, staring out at the countryside rolling past. Men with money problems make rash decisions, and Sato is very good at exploiting desperation. The drive back to Milan felt different, tense, weighted with concerns Enzo wasn't fully articulating. When we finally pulled up to the office, night had fallen, and the city sparkled with lights. You were extraordinary today, Enzo said as the car idled. The way you handled Alessandro, the research you'd prepared, you thought 3 steps ahead. Like you've been doing this for years instead of months. I learned from the best, I said softly. His hand found mine in the darkness of the car's interior. Mia, I need you to understand something. What happened today? Alessandro's warning, Sato's interference. It's going to escalate. He doesn't like losing, and he's realized that targeting me directly won't work. His fingers tightened on mine. So he'll target you instead. Find ways to compromise you, to create leverage. Fear flickered through me. What kind of leverage? Whatever works. False allegations, manufactured scandals, anything that might convince me to back away from deals he wants. His voice dropped. Which is why I need you to be careful. No social media posts without thinking about how they might be misinterpreted. No going anywhere alone until this acquisition closes. And if anyone approaches you, anyone at all, asking questions about me or my business, you tell me immediately. Enzo, you're scaring me. Good. He turned to face me fully, his expression fierce. Be scared. Be cautious. Because you matter to me, Mia, and that makes you valuable to people who want to hurt me. I won't let that happen. But I need you to help me protect you. I wanted to argue that I could take care of myself, that I wasn't some fragile thing that needed guarding. But the raw concern in his eyes stopped me. This wasn't about control or possession. It was about genuine fear for my safety. I'll be careful, I promised. But Enzo, you have to tell me if there's real danger, not just theoretical, actual threats. I need to know what I'm dealing with. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. If it becomes necessary, I will. But for now, just trust me. Let me handle Sato and whatever moves he makes next. We separated in the parking garage, Enzo heading to his penthouse apartment, me to my modest flat across the city. But I lay awake that night, replaying the warning in his voice, the tension in his shoulders, the way he'd held my hand like he was afraid to let go. The next morning, I arrived at the office to find Enzo already there, on the phone, speaking rapid Italian in a tone I'd never heard before. Cold, almost threatening. He ended the call when he saw me, his expression smoothing into professional neutrality. Good morning. What happened? I set down my bag, noting the tension around his eyes. Alessandro Castellani called Count Castellani last night, tried to convince him to accept Sato's offer. His jaw tightened. When that failed, he contacted a journalist friend. There will be a story in tomorrow's financial press questioning the legitimacy of some of my previous acquisitions. My stomach dropped. Can they do that? Just publish unsubstantiated? They'll frame it as investigative journalism, raise questions without making direct accusations. It's enough to create doubt, to make clients nervous. He moved to the window, staring out at the city. Sato's fingerprints are all over this. It's exactly his method. Use proxies to attack credibility, create chaos, then sweep in as the stable alternative. What do? We prepare. He turned back to me, and I saw the strategist behind the calm facade. I've already contacted my attorney and our public relations consultant. We'll issue statements, provide documentation refuting whatever they claim. But Mia, he paused. They might mention you. Your name might appear in the article as my assistant, possibly with insinuations about our relationship. Heat flooded my face. What kind of insinuations? That you're more than just my employee. That your position is based on factors other than competence. His expression darkened. It's character assassination by implication. They won't say anything directly actionable, but the suggestion will be there. Anger flared in my chest. That's absurd. I've earned my position here. I know that. Anyone who's worked with you knows that. But perception matters in this world, and Sato understands that. He crossed to me, his hands settling on my shoulders. If this becomes too much, if you want to step back until the acquisition closes and things settle down, I would understand. Absolutely not. The words came out fierce, surprising us both. I'm not running because some competitor wants to play dirty. If they print lies about me, we'll refute them. If they question my competence, we'll demonstrate it. But I'm not abandoning you when things get difficult. Something flashed in Enzo's eyes. Pride, maybe, or relief. You're certain? Completely. I covered his hands with mine where they rested on my shoulders. We handle this together. Like partners. His smile was small but genuine. Like partners, he agreed. The article dropped the next afternoon, and it was worse than Enzo had prepared me for. Nothing overtly libelous, just carefully worded questions about the authenticity of certain pieces he'd brokered, implications of questionable provenance, and, buried in the second half, a paragraph about his young, attractive assistant, and questions about whether their close working relationship influenced business decisions. I read it 3 times, fury building with each pass. The journalist had done their homework, pulling up social media photos, including the one with Marco that I'd never deleted, and weaving a narrative of impropriety without ever making direct claims. It's garbage, I said, throwing down my tablet. Innuendo and insinuation without a shred of actual evidence. But effective. Enzo's voice was carefully controlled, too controlled. 3 clients have already called asking about the allegations. The Swiss Foundation wants additional documentation before finalizing the Castellani acquisition. So we provide it. We refute everything, demonstrate that it's a smear campaign. We will. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the article on his screen. But Mia, you need to understand. This is what involvement with me looks like. People using whatever tools they can to create leverage, to find weakness. If we continue down this path, if we let what's between us become more than professional, it will happen again. And possibly worse. I moved to stand before his desk, forcing him to look at me. Are you trying to push me away? I'm trying to give you an exit. His gray eyes met mine, and I saw the conflict there, desire warring with protective instinct. Before this goes any further, before you're in so deep that leaving would cost too much. I'm already in deep. The admission hung between us. Have been for months. This article doesn't change that. It should. But he said it without conviction. Well, it doesn't. I straightened, decision crystallizing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to release a statement refuting the acquisition questions with documentation. We're going to have your attorney send a letter to the publication noting the unsubstantiated nature of the personal implications. And then we're going to close the Castellani deal and show Hiroshi Sato that his tactics don't work. Enzo stared at me for a long moment. Then, slowly, a real smile spread across his face. When did you become so fierce? I learned from watching you. I returned the smile, feeling something settle into place between us. Besides, I'm protecting what's mine too. His expression shifted at that, heat replacing concern. Yours? Well, you claimed me first. Seems only fair. The laugh that escaped him was genuine, surprised. Fair, he repeated, standing and moving around the desk. I'm not sure anything about this is fair, Mia. Not to you. Let me worry about what's fair to me. I tilted my head back to meet his gaze as he stopped before me. Right now, I'm more concerned with making sure Sato doesn't win. He won't. The certainty in Enzo's voice was absolute. Because we have something he doesn't. What's that? His hand came up, cupping my face. The truth, and each other. Then he kissed me. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was claiming, possessive, 8 months of restraint finally breaking. His mouth was hot and demanding against mine, his hand sliding into my hair, tilting my head to deepen the kiss. I melted into him, my hands fisting in his shirt, every nerve ending lighting up with sensation. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. No more distance, he murmured. No more pretending. I won't keep doing this dance, Mia. You're mine, and I'm yours. Whatever comes, we face it together. Together, I agreed, the word a vow. Outside, the sun set over Milan, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Inside Enzo's office, we stood wrapped in each other, finally acknowledging what had been building between us from the very beginning. The complications weren't over. Sato would make more moves. There would be more articles, more attempts to create leverage. But we would face them as what we'd always been destined to become, partners in every sense that mattered. And somehow, that made everything feel possible. The kiss changed everything and nothing. We were still professional at the office, mostly, but the careful distance had evaporated entirely. Enzo touched me freely now, his hand at my back when we reviewed contracts, fingers brushing mine when passing documents, his body gravitating toward me in meetings like a compass finding north. The difference was that now I touched back, a hand on his arm when making a point. My shoulder pressed against his when we worked side by side. Small intimacies that felt monumental after months of restraint. You're smiling at your coffee, Enzo observed one morning, his own mouth quirking. Should I be concerned about the competition? Just happy, I admitted, meeting his gaze over the rim of my cup. 3 weeks had passed since the article, since our kiss, since we'd finally stopped pretending. 3 weeks of navigating this new territory between us, still professional, but with undercurrents of something deeper, more permanent. His expression softened. Good. You should be happy. He glanced toward his office door, then back to me, something heated flickering in his gray eyes. We're having dinner tonight. My apartment. I'll cook. You cook? I'm full of surprises, Mia. He moved closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, feel the warmth radiating from him. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. Then he was gone, leaving me flushed and anticipating at my desk. The day proceeded with unusual normalcy. No crisis calls, no competing bids, no attempted sabotage from Sato. The Castellani acquisition was proceeding smoothly. Count Castellani had accepted our offer despite his grandson's objections. The article's impact had been minimal once we'd released comprehensive documentation. Enzo's reputation had weathered the attack intact. Almost too quiet, I thought as I organized files that afternoon. In my months working for Enzo, I'd learned that silence from competitors usually meant something was brewing beneath the surface. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Unknown sender, no subject line. I almost deleted it as spam, but something made me open it instead. The screen filled with photographs, images of me, leaving my apartment, at a cafe with Marco, shopping for groceries. All recent, all taken without my knowledge. Below them, a single line of text. Interesting company you keep, Miss Reyes. Especially for someone so close to Lombardi. My blood ran cold. I clicked through the images, my hands trembling. Someone had been following me, watching me, documenting my movements. The violation sent nausea rolling through my stomach. Mia? Enzo emerged from his office, took one look at my face, and was beside me in 3 strides. What happened? Wordlessly, I showed him the email. Watched his expression shift from concern to something cold and dangerous. How long? His voice was eerily calm. The photos? They're from the past week, but this is the first message. He took my phone, studying the images with professional detachment that somehow made his fury more evident. Sato. He's attempting to create leverage, make you feel unsafe. Hope you'll pressure me to back away from the Castellani deal. It's working, I admitted, hating the tremor in my voice. I feel violated, watched. Enzo's jaw tightened. He set down my phone and pulled me against him, his arms wrapping around me with fierce protectiveness. I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this, should have ensured your security sooner. How could you have known? Because I know how men like Sato operate. His voice was rough against my hair. And because you matter to me, which makes you a target. I was careless with your safety. I pulled back enough to look at him. This isn't your fault. It is. The conviction in his voice was absolute. But I'm going to fix it. Starting now. He pulled out his own phone, making a rapid call in Italian. When he hung up, his expression was set with determination. My head of security will be here in 20 minutes. You're not going anywhere without protection until this is resolved. Enzo, that's excessive. It's necessary. His hands framed my face, forcing me to meet his fierce gaze. Someone was watching you, Mia. Following you. Taking photographs without your knowledge. That's not just intimidation. It's a threat. And I will not take chances with your safety. Not ever. The absolute certainty in his voice, the protective fury emanating from him, it should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like safety, like someone finally standing between me and danger. Okay, I whispered. Whatever you think is best. Relief flashed across his face. Thank you for trusting me. Giulio, Enzo's head of security, arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a compact man in his 50s with alert eyes and an economy of movement that suggested military background. He reviewed the email, asked pointed questions about my routine, and made notes on his phone. Standard intimidation protocol, he assessed. The photography is professional quality but not military-grade surveillance. Whoever Sato hired is competent but not exceptional. We can handle this. I want someone on her around the clock, Enzo said. Marco for days, Sofia for nights. They're both cleared for close protection work. Already arranged, Giulio confirmed. Miss Reyes, I'll need your schedule. Preferred routes. Regular locations. The more information I have, the better I can ensure your safety. I provided what he needed, still slightly dazed by how quickly Enzo had mobilized resources. Within an hour, I had 2 additional people in my life. Marco, not my cousin, a different Marco which would be confusing, and Sofia, both professional and unobtrusive, but clearly competent. "This is surreal," I murmured to Enzo once Giulio had left to coordinate details. "This is necessary." He pulled me back into his office, closing the door for privacy. "Mia, I need you to understand something. Sato sending those photographs? That's not the end of his play. It's the beginning. He's testing boundaries, seeing how far he can push before I react." "And how will you react?" Something cold and dangerous flickered in his eyes. "By showing him that touching what's mine has consequences. I don't want you to do anything illegal." The words tumbled out in a rush. "Or violent. Or anything that could come back on you." His expression softened at my concern. "I won't. My response will be perfectly legal and entirely devastating. But it will send a clear message. You are off limits. Forever." The possessiveness in his voice sent heat spiraling through me despite the circumstances. "And what message are you sending to me?" "That I protect what I care about." He stepped closer, his hands settling on my waist. "That I will move heaven and earth to keep you safe. That you matter more than any acquisition, any business deal, any—" He stopped, something vulnerable flashing across his face. "Than anything, Mia. You matter more than anything." The declaration stole my breath. "Enzo, I love you." The words were quiet, certain, absolute. "I've been falling in love with you since you reorganized my filing system and told me mediocrity was unacceptable. And I know it's complicated. I know the timing is terrible with everything happening, but I need you to know, before this goes any further, I love you." Tears pricked my eyes. "I love you too. I think I have for months, but I was afraid to admit it. Afraid it was one-sided, afraid of ruining what we had professionally." He kissed me, swallowing the rest of my words. This kiss was different from the first, less desperate, more certain, a claiming and a promise, and a homecoming all at once. "Dinner at my apartment," he murmured against my mouth. "Still on, but we're moving it to 6 instead of 7 so you have more daylight for the trip over." "Practical and romantic," I teased, trying to lighten the mood. "I'm nothing if not efficient." His smile was small but genuine. "And Mia, wear the necklace. I want to see you wearing nothing but that tonight." Heat flooded through me at the implication. Presumptuous. Hopeful. His thumb brushed my lower lip. "But if you're not ready—" "I'm ready." I cut him off. "I've been ready. I'm just nervous. You're my first—" I stopped, embarrassed. Understanding dawned in his eyes, followed by something fierce and possessive. "Your first?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "I know. Pathetically inexperienced for 23. Perfect." His voice was rough. "Absolutely perfect. And Mia, I'll take care of you. Every step, every moment. I promise." The sincerity in his words, the care, it made my chest ache with feeling. "I trust you." "Good." He stepped back, clearly forcing himself to return to professional mode. "Because right now, I need you to help me destroy Hiroshi Sato's credibility once and for all." The shift from personal to business was jarring but welcome. I needed the distraction, the focus. "What do you need?" "Everything you can find on his past acquisitions. Every questionable deal. Every buyer who felt deceived. Every piece with disputed provenance. We're going to compile a comprehensive report and release it to every major dealer and institution in Europe and Asia." That's aggressive. But even as I said it, I was already opening my laptop, fingers flying across keys. "He came after you." Enzo's voice was cold steel. "He made this personal. Now he'll learn what that costs." We worked through the afternoon, compiling documentation, verifying sources, building an airtight case against Sato's business practices. By 5, we had a 40-page report that would devastate his reputation in the antiquities world. "This will end his career," I observed, reviewing the final document. "Yes." Enzo showed no remorse. "He should have considered that before he targeted you." At 5:45, Marco the bodyguard appeared to escort me to Enzo's apartment. The ride through Milan's evening traffic felt surreal. Sophia following in a second car, Marco alert and watchful beside me. This was my life now. Protected, watched, safe but constrained. Enzo's penthouse occupied the top floor of a converted industrial building overlooking the Navigli district. I'd never been here before. Our relationship had existed entirely within the professional sphere until now. Crossing this threshold felt monumental. He answered the door in jeans and a casual shirt, sleeves rolled to his elbows, looking more relaxed than I'd ever seen him, and somehow more dangerous for it. "You came." Relief colored his voice. "You doubted I would?" "I worried the photographs might have scared you away. From me. From this." He gestured between us. I stepped inside, taking in the loft-style space. Exposed brick, modern furniture, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a stunning view of the city. "It would take more than threatening photographs to scare me away from you." His expression softened. "Good. Because I'm not letting you go. Not ever." Dinner was surprisingly normal. Pasta he'd made himself, good wine, easy conversation that flowed like we'd been doing this for years instead of hours. He asked about my life before working for him, and I found myself telling stories I rarely shared. About losing my parents young, being raised by my grandmother, putting myself through university, the loneliness of being young and alone in a big city. "Is that why you took the job with me?" he asked, refilling my wine. "The salary?" "Partly," I admitted, "but also because you had a reputation for being demanding but fair. I wanted to work for someone who would challenge me, who would teach me things I couldn't learn anywhere else." "And have I? Taught you things?" "Every day." I met his gaze across the table. "About antiquities, yes. About negotiation and strategy. But also about myself. About what I'm capable of. What I want. And what do you want, Mia?" The question hung between us, weighted with meaning beyond the simple words. "You," I said simply. "This. Whatever we're building together." He stood, moving around the table to pull me to my feet. "Come with me." He led me to the bedroom, a space dominated by a massive bed and more windows showcasing the twinkling city. And there, on the nightstand, was something that made my breath catch. A framed photograph. The one Marco had posted, the one that had started everything. But Enzo had printed it, placed it where he'd see it every morning and every night. "You kept it," I whispered. It's the moment I realized I couldn't pretend anymore. His arms wrapped around me from behind, his chin resting on my shoulder as we both looked at the image. That photograph of you smiling at someone else made me insane with jealousy. Made me call you in the middle of the night and demand you delete it. Made me realize I was already too far gone. I turned in his arms, looking up at him. "I never deleted it, even when you asked me to." "I know." His smile was rueful. "You were right to defy me, to make me admit why it bothered me, to force me to be honest about what I felt." "No more secrets," I said, sliding my hands up his chest. "No more pretending." "No more secrets," he agreed. Then more softly, "Are you sure, Mia? Because once we cross this line—" "We already crossed the line," I interrupted. "Months ago. We've just been too careful to admit it." "Then let me show you." His mouth found mine, and this kiss was different from all the others. Deeper, slower, more purposeful. A promise and a claiming all at once. He was gentle, patient, taking his time to learn every response, every sigh, every place that made me gasp. When he finally moved over me, his eyes held mine. "Mine," he whispered, and it wasn't a question. "Yours," I agreed. "Always yours." Outside, the city glittered with a million lights. Inside, we created our own world. Just us. Just this. Just the perfect rightness of finally being together. Later, wrapped in his arms with the necklace still around my throat, I felt complete in a way I'd never experienced. "I'm going to marry you," Enzo said quietly, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. "Someday, when everything settles, when I can offer you the life you deserve. I know you don't." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "But I do. I need to wake up to you every morning. Need to know you're mine in every way that matters legally and emotionally. Need everyone to know that you're not just my assistant or my girlfriend, but my wife, my partner, my everything." Tears pricked my eyes at the raw honesty. "Yes. Yes?" He pulled back to look at me, surprise and joy warring in his expression. "Yes, I'll marry you. Someday. When everything settles." I touched his face, feeling the slight stubble along his jaw. "But Enzo, I don't need the perfect life or the perfect timing. I just need you." His kiss was answer enough. We spent the night learning each other, sleeping tangled together, waking to make love again as dawn painted the sky. It felt like a beginning, like everything before this had been prologue to the real story starting now. At 7, his phone rang, Giulio, with news that Hiroshi Sato had been arrested overnight. Financial fraud, apparently unrelated to the antiquities business. But the timing seemed too convenient to be coincidence. "What did you do?" I asked as Enzo hung up, suspicion coloring my tone. "I may have mentioned to certain authorities that they should examine his business practices more closely." He said it casually, but I saw the satisfaction in his eyes. Specifically, his pattern of using coerced photography to intimidate competitors and associates. Turns out, you weren't the first person he targeted. The others were happy to provide evidence once they knew they weren't alone. "So you didn't do anything illegal?" I made a few phone calls, connected dots that authorities hadn't noticed. Let justice run its natural course. He pulled me back against him. Completely legal, entirely ethical, and incredibly effective. "You're terrifying," I murmured, but without heat. "Only to people who threaten what's mine." His arms tightened around me. "To you, I'm just yours." "Just mine," I agreed, smiling against his shoulder. Later, as we prepared for the day, he showed me the framed photograph again. "I'm keeping this here, a reminder of the moment everything changed." "You mean the moment you went insane with jealousy?" "The moment I realized I was in love with you," he corrected, and couldn't hide it anymore. I kissed him, soft and sweet. Best Instagram post I ever made. "Best photograph I almost demanded you delete," he countered. We laughed together, and it felt like coming home. The Castellani acquisition closed 2 weeks later. Count Castellani even sent a personal note thanking us both for our professionalism and care with his family's legacy. Alessandro, apparently, had been cut out of the financial decisions after his attempt to sabotage the deal. Enzo's business thrived. My role expanded from assistant to genuine partner. We worked together seamlessly, our professional chemistry enhanced rather than complicated by our personal relationship. And every night, I went home to him. To the penthouse that had become ours. To the bedroom where our photograph held pride of place. To the man who had taught me that sometimes the most powerful thing you could do was admit what you felt. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Enzo proposed officially, with a ring this time, antique and perfect, beside the photograph that had started everything. I said yes, of course. Had been saying yes to him in 1,000 small ways, since the moment I'd refused to delete that photograph. Our wedding was small, intimate, held in a villa in Tuscany surrounded by people we loved. Marco, my cousin, not the bodyguard, stood with me, teasing that he'd known from that first photograph that Enzo was already gone for me. In my bouquet, nestled among cream roses, I wore the cameo necklace that had been Enzo's first real declaration. And later, in our villa's library, we hung the framed photograph beside our wedding portrait. A reminder of where we'd started, of the moment jealousy had given way to honesty, of the Instagram post that had changed everything. "Do you regret not deleting it?" Enzo asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind as we studied the images side by side. "Never." I leaned back against him. "Best decision I ever made was refusing to give you what you wanted." "You gave me everything I wanted," he corrected. "Eventually, just made me work for it." "And was it worth it?" I turned in his arms, looking up at him. His answer was a kiss, deep and certain and full of promise. Outside, the Tuscan sun set in shades of amber and gold. Inside, we stood wrapped in each other, finally exactly where we belonged. Together. Always together. The photograph that had almost been deleted had instead become the cornerstone of everything we'd built. Proof that sometimes the best beginnings came from moments of unexpected honesty, from jealousy transformed into love, from a man who couldn't bear to see someone else's arm around the woman who had already become his entire world. 2 years of marriage transformed what I'd thought I knew about love and partnership. Enzo wasn't just my husband. He was my collaborator, my confidant, the person who understood me in ways I'd never expected anyone could. The antiquities business flourished under our combined leadership. I'd transitioned fully from assistant to partner, my name appearing beside Enzo's on all major acquisitions. Lombardi and Reyes had a certain ring to it, even if I'd kept my maiden name professionally, while becoming Mia Lombardi in every personal sense. "You're staring at that photograph again," Enzo observed one morning, catching me paused beside our bedroom nightstand, where the infamous Instagram image still held its place of honor. "Just remembering." I touched the frame gently. "How terrified I was when you called that night. How defiant I felt refusing to delete it. How that one moment changed absolutely everything." He moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, his chin resting on my shoulder exactly as it had countless times before. I was insane that night. Couldn't focus on anything except the sight of another man touching you. Even after I flew back to Milan, even after I saw you at the office the next morning, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was losing something precious before I'd ever really claimed it. "You never really claimed it," I corrected, turning in his arms. "We chose each other. There's a difference." His smile was soft, the expression he reserved only for me. "Semantics. But you're right. You chose to stay when I gave you every reason to run. Chose to stand beside me when things got dangerous. Chose to love me despite all the complications that came with it. Best choice I ever made. Second best," he corrected, his thumb brushing along my jaw. The best was refusing to delete that photograph. Everything else followed from that single act of defiance. Our morning routine had become comfortable over 2 years. Coffee together before the day's demands pulled us in different directions. Stolen moments of intimacy before assuming our professional roles. The easy partnership of 2 people who'd learned to move through life in sync. At the office, we'd found our rhythm. Enzo handled negotiations with the kind of quiet intensity that made competitors nervous. I managed client relationships and research, my background in art history finally put to full use. Together, we'd built something extraordinary. A business that operated with absolute integrity while still competing at the highest levels. "The Kimura collection viewing is this afternoon," I reminded him, reviewing the day's schedule over my tablet. They're expecting us at 2. Confirmed. He was reading through correspondence, his coffee cooling forgotten beside him. And tonight? Dinner at my mother's. She's insisting on her monthly family gathering. I smiled at the mention of Signora Lombardi, who'd welcomed me into the family with surprising warmth once she'd understood that Enzo's interest in me was genuine and permanent. Your mother just wants to know when we're giving her grandchildren. And what do we tell her? The same thing we always tell her, when the time is right. But I said it with less conviction than usual, my hand unconsciously moving to my stomach where I'd been feeling slightly off for the past week. Enzo noticed, because Enzo noticed everything about me. Are you feeling all right? You've been tired lately. Just busy season. But even as I said it, I was doing mental calculations. When had my last period been? 3 weeks? 4? My cycle had never been perfectly regular, but still. Mia. He set down his coffee, giving me his full attention. If something's wrong, nothing's wrong, I assured him quickly. Just, maybe I should see a doctor. Rule out anything serious. His expression shifted from concern to understanding so quickly it made my breath catch. You think... I don't know. Maybe. It's probably nothing, but... I couldn't finish the sentence, suddenly overwhelmed by the possibility. Enzo was beside me in an instant, his hands gentle on my shoulders. Would you want it? If you are? Would you? Mia, I've wanted everything with you since the moment you challenged me about that photograph. His voice was rough with emotion. A child, a future, growing old together, all of it. But only if you want it too. Only if you're ready. I think I might be ready, I admitted. Terrified but ready. He kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. Make an appointment. Today. We'll know for certain. The Kimura viewing proceeded normally, both of us falling into professional mode, despite the possibility hanging between us. The collection was stunning. Edo period prints and ceramics that would be perfect for our Swiss client's museum. We negotiated terms, arranged for authentication, handled business with the efficient partnership we'd perfected over 2 years. But underneath, my mind kept circling back to the same question. What if? At 4, I excused myself and made a call to my doctor. They could fit me in tomorrow morning. One simple test, and we'd know. That evening at his mother's home in the Milan suburbs, I watched Enzo interact with his nieces and nephews, patient with their questions, playful in a way he rarely showed others, completely at ease despite the chaos of children running through every room. He'll be a wonderful father, Signora Lombardi observed, appearing beside me with characteristic stealth. When you're ready to give him that gift. I looked at my mother-in-law, this elegant woman who'd raised a son capable of both ruthless business tactics and tender devotion. Were you afraid? When you first had children? Terrified, she admitted. Every parent is. But Mia, you and Enzo, you've built something solid. Whatever comes next, you'll handle it together. That's what marriage is. Facing the unknown with someone who loves you enough to walk through fire beside you. Her words stayed with me through dinner, through the drive home, through Enzo's careful attention, that told me he was just as anxious about tomorrow as I was. The next morning arrived with autumn chill in the air. We drove to the doctor's office together, Enzo's hand wrapped around mine the entire way. The test was simple. The wait for results felt eternal. When the doctor returned, her smile told us everything before the words did. Congratulations, you're about 6 weeks along. Everything looks healthy and normal. The world tilted, then righted itself in an entirely new configuration. Pregnant. I was carrying Enzo's child. Our child. You're certain? Enzo's voice was steadier than mine would have been. Completely. We'll want to schedule regular checkups, but preliminary indicators are all positive. The doctor continued talking, about prenatal vitamins and diet and what to expect. but I heard it through a haze of shock and joy. In the car afterward, Enzo and I sat in stunned silence. "We're having a baby," I finally said, testing the words. "We're having a baby," he repeated, then pulled me against him, his arms tight around me. "Mia, his voice cracked. "I never thought I'd have this, never thought I deserved it." "You deserve everything," I whispered against his shoulder. "All the happiness in the world. I have you. That's more than I ever dreamed possible." He pulled back to look at me, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "And now this. You've given me everything, Mia. Everything." We told his mother that evening, unable to keep the secret even one day. Her joy was instantaneous and overwhelming. Tears and embraces and immediate plans for nursery colors and baby names. "I knew," she said, laughing through happy tears. "A mother knows these things. I've been waiting for you both to figure it out." The next months passed in a beautiful blur. My body changed, slowly at first, then more obviously. Enzo was attentive to the point of obsessive, monitoring my diet, ensuring I rested enough, adjusting our work schedules to accommodate doctor's appointments, and the exhaustion that came with growing a human. "You're being ridiculous," I told him one afternoon when he insisted I elevate my feet during a client video conference. "I'm being appropriately concerned," he corrected. "You're carrying the most precious thing in the world. My concern is justified." Business continued, though we scaled back on travel, and I handled more negotiations remotely. Our clients adjusted, understanding that Lombardi and Reyes was now a family operation in the truest sense. At 5 months, we learned we were having a girl. Enzo cried when the technician pointed out her tiny features on the ultrasound screen. "A daughter," he kept repeating, wonder and terror mixing in his voice. "We're having a daughter." "Are you disappointed?" I asked, though I'd already seen the answer in his expression. "Disappointed?" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Mia, she's perfect. You've given me perfection." "She's going to have you wrapped around her finger," I observed, smiling. "Completely," he agreed without shame. "Just like her mother." We named her Elena, after my grandmother who'd raised me. Enzo insisted, saying the woman who'd shaped me into who I became deserved the honor. The nursery took shape in what had been a guest room. Soft yellows and creams, a vintage crib Enzo had acquired from a Florentine dealer, artwork carefully chosen for whimsy rather than value. And in one corner, on a small shelf, sat the framed photograph. "Are you putting that in here?" I asked when I noticed. "It's part of her origin story," Enzo explained, adjusting the frame's position. "The moment her parents stopped pretending and started building the life she'd be born into. She should know how much went into creating the family she belongs to." "You're impossibly romantic," I said, but I was smiling. "Only with you." Elena arrived 2 weeks early on a spring morning, making her presence known with impressive lung capacity. The labor was long and exhausting, but Enzo never left my side, coaching my breathing, wiping my forehead, telling me I was strong enough, beautiful enough, perfect enough. When they finally placed our daughter in my arms, everything else fell away. She was tiny and wrinkled and absolutely perfect, with Enzo's dark hair and eyes that might someday turn gray like his. "Hello, little one," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "We've been waiting for you." Enzo's arms wrapped around both of us, his forehead resting against mine as we looked down at our daughter together. "Thank you," he said roughly, "for this, for her, for everything." "We made her together," I reminded him. "You carried her, grew her, brought her into the world." His voice was thick with emotion. "You're extraordinary, Mia. Absolutely extraordinary." Our families came to meet Elena that afternoon, Signora Lombardi weeping happy tears, Marco, my cousin, making jokes about finally being an uncle, friends and colleagues sending flowers and gifts until the room overflowed with celebration. But the best moment came later, when everyone had left, and it was just the three of us. Enzo held Elena with the careful reverence of someone cradling the most precious thing in existence, talking to her in soft Italian, making promises about the life he'd give her, the world he'd show her, the love that would surround her always. I watched them together and felt my heart expand impossibly further. This man who'd started as my enigmatic employer, who'd transformed into my partner and husband, was now the father of my child. The progression felt both improbable and inevitable. "What are you thinking?" he asked, catching me watching them. "That I'm the luckiest person alive. That's my line." He shifted Elena carefully, making room for me beside them. "Come here. We need a family photo." I snuggled against his side, our daughter cradled between us, and pulled out my phone for a selfie. The three of us, tired, disheveled, completely besotted with the tiny human we'd created. "Should I post this one?" I teased, remembering the photograph that had started everything. "Absolutely." His smile was genuine, warm, free of the jealous possessiveness that had characterized his reaction 3 years ago. "Let the whole world see what we've built." I posted it with a simple caption: "Our newest acquisition, worth more than anything we've ever found." Within minutes, congratulations poured in from clients, colleagues, friends, but the comment that made me laugh came from my cousin Marco. "Better photo than the last Instagram post that caused drama. This one's keeper." "He's not wrong," Enzo observed, reading over my shoulder, though the last one was pretty important too. "The last one got you to finally admit how you felt," I corrected. "No, the last one made me realize I couldn't keep hiding how I felt. There's a difference." He pressed a kiss to my temple. "But this one? This one shows what happens when two people stop being afraid of loving each other completely." Elena made a small sound, her tiny hand wrapping around Enzo's finger with surprising strength. He looked down at her with such wonder, such love, that I felt tears prick my eyes again. "She's going to be so loved," I whispered. "Spoiled completely," he agreed. "Between my mother and us, she won't stand a chance of not being absolutely adored every moment of her life." "Just like her father adores her mother?" "Exactly like that." His gray eyes met mine, warm and certain, and full of all the love we'd built over 3 years. "Forever, Mia. All of us. Together. Forever." "Forever," I echoed, the word a promise and a vow and a certainty. Outside, Milan bustled with afternoon life, traffic and voices, and the constant hum of a city in motion. Inside our hospital room, we existed in our own perfect bubble, a family complete, a love story that had started with jealousy and defiance, and had transformed into something beautiful and permanent. And somewhere in our home's nursery, a framed photograph waited. The Instagram post that had changed everything, that had forced honesty where there'd been silence, that had become the cornerstone of the family we'd built. The photograph that almost got deleted had instead become our most treasured beginning. 5 years had a way of transforming everything, while somehow keeping the most important things exactly the same. Elena was 4 now, a whirlwind of dark curls and gray eyes that saw too much, just like her father's. She had Enzo's intensity and my curiosity, a combination that kept us constantly entertained and occasionally exhausted. "Papa, why can't we keep it?" Elena asked for the 3rd time that morning, standing in Enzo's office and pointing at a Renaissance bronze sculpture that had just arrived for authentication. "Because it belongs to a museum, Tesoro," Enzo explained patiently, crouching to her level. "We're just making sure it's real before it goes to its new home where many people can enjoy it." "But I want to enjoy it," she argued, her lower lip jutting out in a pout that would have been devastating if we hadn't already grown somewhat immune to it. "You are enjoying it," I interjected, rescuing Enzo from the circular logic of a 4-year-old. "Right now." And when we visit the museum, you'll see it again and remember that you got to see it first." Elena considered this, then nodded with the serious gravity she brought to all her decisions. "Okay, but next time, I want to keep one." "We'll discuss it," Enzo said, which was his diplomatic way of saying absolutely not, "but I don't want to argue about it right now." She scampered off to where her toys were arranged in one corner of the office, a small concession to the reality that running an international antiquities business while raising a child required creative integration of responsibilities. "She's going to be trouble," I observed, watching her settle in with her coloring books. "She already is," Enzo replied, but his voice held only affection. "Just like her mother." I wasn't trouble. I was professionally assertive. "You refused a direct order from your employer based on principle." His arms wrapped around me from behind, a gesture so familiar it felt like coming home. "That's definitely trouble. The best kind." I leaned back against him, comfortable in the ease we'd built over 5 years of marriage. The business had grown beyond our wildest projections. Lombardi & Reyes was now one of the most respected names in antiquities acquisition, known for ethical dealing and scholarly expertise. We'd moved to a larger space 2 years ago, hiring additional staff and expanding into museum consultation. I'd published my first book last year, a comprehensive guide to Renaissance bronze authentication that had become required reading in graduate programs across Europe. Enzo still handled the major negotiations, but increasingly we worked as true equals, our expertise complementing and enhancing each other's. "The Tokyo Museum called again," I said, pulling up the message on my phone. "They're interested in us curating their new European wing." "That's a 2-year project." Enzo's voice held a question underneath the statement. "At least." I turned in his arms to face him. "Would require extended time in Tokyo, probably with us alternating who's there." Or, I hesitated, "we could make it a family adventure. Elena would adapt. A 4-year-old in Tokyo for 2 years?" But he was already considering it. I could see the wheels turning behind his eyes. It could work. She'd become fluent in Japanese, experience a different culture, and your research would benefit from direct access to their collections. "You're already mentally planning it," I accused, smiling. "I'm mentally planning how to make it work if we decide to do it," he corrected. "There's a difference." Elena looked up from her coloring. "Are we going somewhere?" "Maybe Tokyo," I said, moving to sit beside her. "For a long visit. Would you like that?" Her eyes widened with the same excitement she brought to all new experiences. "Can we see Mount Fuji? And eat sushi? And—" "All of it," Enzo assured her, joining us on the floor with an ease that would have shocked anyone who knew only his professional persona. "If we go, we'll explore everything." "Then I want to go." She returned to her coloring with renewed energy. "I'll color a picture of it for you." After Elena had been collected by her nanny for afternoon activities, Enzo and I returned to the business at hand, authenticating a manuscript collection and preparing for an upcoming auction. "It still amazes me sometimes," I said, reviewing provenance documents, "that this is our life, that we built this together." "Does it feel different than you imagined?" Enzo asked, looking up from his own work. "Completely." I set down the documents. "When I took the job as your assistant, I thought I'd spend a few years learning the business, then move on to something else. I never imagined." I gestured around us, encompassing not just the office but everything we'd created. "That you'd fall in love with your demanding employer? That I'd find a partner in every sense that matters? That I'd build a family and a business and a life that feels exactly right?" I moved to sit on the edge of his desk, a familiar position from countless previous conversations. 5 years ago, I was terrified of losing my job because I wouldn't delete an Instagram post. Now I can't imagine my life without you in it. Enzo's expression softened in the way it only did in private. "That photograph is still the best thing that ever happened to me. Well, second best." His gaze drifted to where Elena's coloring supplies were scattered. She might edge it out. Might? I teased. The photograph led to you. You led to her. It's all connected. He stood, pulling me against him. And I'm grateful for every moment of it, even the parts where I was insane with jealousy. Especially those parts, I corrected, because they made you honest, made us honest. His kiss was familiar and still thrilling, 5 years of marriage having done nothing to diminish the heat between us. When we broke apart, both slightly breathless, he rested his forehead against mine. I love you, he said simply. More now than that first night I called demanding you delete the photograph, more than the day we got married, more than yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than I do today. That's mathematically impossible, I replied, emotion making my voice thick. There's an upper limit to how much love a person can contain. Then I'll keep expanding the limits. His thumb brushed along my jaw in the gesture that had become his signature touch. Forever, Mia. That's how long I intend to keep loving you more. The afternoon proceeded with meetings and emails and all the mundane business of running a successful company. But underneath, I felt the contentment of a life well lived, a partnership that worked in every dimension, a love that had started with chaos and settled into something solid and sure. That evening, at home in the house we'd bought 3 years ago, a converted loft in the Brera district with space for Elena to play and a dedicated study for my research, we fell into our usual routine. Dinner together, bath time negotiations with a 4-year-old who had opinions about everything, story time in Elena's room beneath the mobile of art history figures that Enzo had commissioned from a sculptor friend. Read the one about the girl and the dragon, Elena requested, snuggling into her pillows. Again? Enzo asked, though he was already reaching for the well-worn book. You know this one by heart. But I like how you do the voices. She grinned at him, already winning this negotiation like she won most of them. I watched from the doorway as Enzo read to our daughter, his deep voice shifting between characters, her delighted giggles at the parts she knew were coming. This man who negotiated million-euro deals without flinching became putty in the hands of a 4-year-old girl. After Elena finally drifted to sleep, we retreated to our bedroom, to the space that had been ours alone for 5 years, that held our most intimate moments and private conversations. The photograph was still there on the nightstand, exactly where it had always been. But now it was joined by others. Our wedding photo, Elena's newborn picture, snapshots from family vacations and quiet Sunday mornings. Sometimes I think about that night, Enzo said, noticing my gaze on the original photograph. How close I came to ruining everything by demanding you conform to what I wanted, instead of accepting you as you were. You didn't ruin anything, I reminded him. You forced a conversation we needed to have, made us both honest about what we felt. Still, he picked up the frame, studying the image of me with Marco, the photograph that had changed everything. I was an idiot, jealous and possessive and completely unreasonable. You were human. I took the frame from him, looking at my younger self, 22 and smiling, completely unaware that her life was about to transform. And you gave me this. I gestured to encompass not just the room, but our entire life. So I'm grateful for your temporary insanity. Temporary? His eyebrow rose. I'm still possessive about you, still unreasonably jealous when anyone looks at you too long. But you've learned to channel it better, I observed, into protecting what we've built instead of trying to control it. You've made me a better man, Mia. The raw honesty in his voice still had the power to undo me. Every day you make me want to be worthy of you, of her, of this life we're creating. You're already worthy. I set down the photograph and moved into his arms, the place I'd occupied countless times over 5 years. You were always worthy. You just needed to believe it. We made love that night, with the comfortable familiarity of long intimacy and the continued passion that hadn't diminished with time. Afterward, wrapped in each other, we talked about Tokyo and Elena's future and the possibility of expanding our family again someday. Would you want another child? Enzo asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my shoulder. Maybe, I admitted. Not right now, but someday. Would you? A son this time, he said thoughtfully. To balance things out. Though knowing us, we'd probably have another girl, and she'd have Elena wrapped around her finger within minutes. Just like you and I have each other wrapped around our respective fingers. Exactly. His arms tightened around me. We're pathetically in love, and I wouldn't have it any other way. The next morning brought news that would change our trajectory again. Count Castellani, whose collection had sparked the confrontation with Sado 5 years ago, had passed away, leaving his estate to a charitable foundation with specific instructions that Lombardi and Reyes handle the distribution to museums worldwide. It's a massive undertaking, I said, reviewing the documentation the estate's lawyers had sent. 18 months minimum, requires working with institutions across 3 continents. And positions us as the premier ethical dealers in Europe, Enzo added, reading over my shoulder. Every museum will want to work with us after this. We'd need to hire more staff, probably open a satellite office in New York to handle the American institutions. I was already mentally cataloging what would be required. So we do it. Enzo said it with the same certainty he'd brought to every major decision we'd made together. Tokyo in this. We make both work, because that's what we do. We find ways to make impossible things possible. When did we become people who take on impossible things? I asked, but I was smiling. The moment you refused to delete that photograph. His arms wrapped around me from behind as we both looked at the screen full of opportunity. That's when you taught me that the impossible was just the not yet accomplished. We spent the day planning, strategizing, making calls to potential hires and trusted contacts. By evening, we had the framework of a plan, aggressive but achievable, if we were willing to work harder than we'd ever worked before. Are you sure? I asked Enzo that night as we reviewed our strategy. This is going to consume the next 2 years. Late nights, travel, constant demands. With you beside me? He didn't hesitate. Absolutely. We've built something extraordinary, Mia. This is just the next evolution of it. The next evolution, I repeated, liking the phrase. From your assistant to your partner to what? Internationally recognized antiquities experts? To whatever we decide to become, he corrected. Together. That's the only requirement, that we do it together. Elena appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes. Can't sleep, she announced. Too many thoughts. Come here, Tesoro, Enzo said, opening his arms. She climbed into his lap, and I watched them, my husband and daughter, the family I'd built with a man who'd once been my enigmatic employer. What thoughts are keeping you awake? I asked, smoothing her dark curls. If we go to Tokyo and help museums and see new places, will we still be us? Her question was so earnest, so concerned, that my chest ached. Always, Enzo assured her. No matter where we go or what we do, we'll always be us. Your mama and I, we figured that out 5 years ago, that the location doesn't matter as long as we're together. Because you love each other? Elena asked. Because we choose each other, I corrected gently. Every day. That's what makes a family. Choosing to be together even when things get complicated. She seemed satisfied with this answer, settling more comfortably against Enzo. Then I want to go to Tokyo and help with museums and see everything. Then that's what we'll do, Enzo promised. Later, after returning Elena to her bed and finishing our own preparations for sleep, I found myself once again looking at the photograph on our nightstand. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I had deleted it? I asked. If I'd just complied with your demand instead of pushing back? Enzo considered this seriously. We would have found another way. Maybe taken longer, been more circuitous about it, but we would have ended up here eventually. You sound very certain. I am. He pulled me against him, our bodies fitting together with the ease of years. Some things are inevitable, Mia. You and I? We were inevitable from the moment you told me mediocrity was unacceptable. The photograph just accelerated what was already in motion. So it wasn't the catalyst, just the speed increase. It was the moment of truth, he corrected. The point where I couldn't pretend anymore. Where jealousy forced honesty and honesty forced change. That photograph didn't create what was between us. It revealed it. I thought about that as I drifted toward sleep. About the young woman I'd been 5 years ago, taking a selfie with her cousin, completely unaware that her life was about to transform. About the man who'd seen that photograph and lost his carefully maintained composure. About how one moment of defiance, one refusal to simply comply, had sparked everything that followed. I'm glad I was stubborn, I murmured against Enzo's shoulder. I'm glad you were fearless, he replied. Still are. It's one of the 1,000 reasons I love you. Only 1,000? A conservative estimate. His lips brushed my forehead. Sleep, amore. Tomorrow we start building the next chapter. The next chapter. It felt appropriate. 5 years had been the foundation. Learning each other, building trust, creating a family and a business and a life that worked in every dimension. The next phase would be evolution, expanding into new territories, taking on challenges that would test us in different ways, continuing to grow both individually and together. But the core would remain the same. Partnership, trust, love that had been forged through honesty and maintained through choice. In the morning, Elena bounced into our room as sunrise painted the sky in shades of amber and gold, announcing that she'd decided Tokyo needed to happen immediately because she'd dreamed about Mount Fuji. Patience, Tesoro, Enzo said, pulling her into bed between us for morning cuddles that had become family tradition. These things take time to plan properly. But I'm ready now, she insisted with 4-year-old logic. Being ready and being prepared are different things, I explained, brushing her curls from her face. We need to make sure everything is arranged properly so our adventure goes smoothly. She sighed dramatically, but accepted this, snuggling between us with the complete trust of a child who'd never known anything but love and security. Later, at the office, we formally accepted the Castellani estate project and began the complex work of cataloging, authenticating, and placing priceless artifacts in appropriate institutions. It was exhausting, exhilarating work that required every skill we'd developed over the years. This is what we were meant to do, Enzo said one evening, as we reviewed placement proposals for a collection of Venetian glass. Not just deal in antiquities, but ensure they end up where they can educate and inspire. When did we become idealists? I teased, though I felt the same sense of purpose. The moment we realized we could make money and make a difference, he replied seriously. That we didn't have to choose between commercial success and ethical responsibility. You've changed, I observed, from the man who operated in gray spaces to someone who actively promotes transparency and scholarship. You changed me, he corrected. You and our life together. Hard to maintain cynicism when you're raising a child and building a legacy you want them to be proud of. The months that followed were intense but rewarding. We opened the New York office with a trusted colleague managing day-to-day operations. Hired additional staff in Milan to handle the increased workload. I published a second book, this one on ethical acquisition practices. Enzo gave talks at universities about the intersection of commerce and cultural preservation. And through it all, we remained us. partners who'd learned to navigate professional demands and personal needs with practiced ease. Parents who made time for school plays and bedtime stories despite international conference calls. A couple who still looked at each other across crowded rooms and felt that same spark that had ignited 5 years ago. On our 5th wedding anniversary, Enzo surprised me with a trip to Tuscany, just the two of us, Elena staying with his mother, who absolutely delighted in spoiling her granddaughter. "This is where we got married," I said unnecessarily, looking out at the villa where we'd exchanged vows. "This is where we started our marriage," Enzo corrected. "But we started us long before this, in an office in Milan, with a photograph that almost got deleted." He'd brought something with him, a box wrapped in simple paper. Inside was a leather-bound album, and when I opened it, tears immediately filled my eyes. Every photograph from our 5 years together. The Instagram post with Marco on the first page. Our wedding photos. Elena's birth. Family vacations and quiet moments, and the 1,000 small instances that comprised a life shared. "Our story," Enzo said quietly. "From the beginning until now, with space for everything still to come. It's perfect." I clutched the album, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it. "You're perfect." "Hardly." But he smiled, pulling me close. Just a man who got lucky enough that the woman he couldn't stop thinking about refused to do what he demanded. Who pushed back and forced honesty and changed everything. "We changed everything," I corrected. "Together." "Together," he agreed. That night, in the same villa where we'd celebrated our wedding, we made love with the passion of newlyweds and the deep intimacy of long partnership. Afterward, looking at the album of our years together, I felt the weight of gratitude for every choice that had led us here. "What do you think Elena will remember about all this?" I asked. "About us, about this life we're building?" "That her parents loved each other," Enzo said simply. "That they worked hard and chose each other every day. That they built something meaningful together." He paused. "And maybe that her father once lost his mind over an Instagram post." I laughed, the sound echoing in our room. "That story is definitely going in the family history." "As it should." He kissed my temple. "It's a good story, about jealousy and defiance, and love that refused to stay hidden. About two people who found each other despite all the reasons they shouldn't have," I added, "and built everything that mattered because they did." We returned to Milan renewed, ready for the next phase. Elena had grown even in just 3 days, or so it seemed. More articulate, more curious, more herself. "Nonna taught me Italian songs," she announced proudly. "And she said when I'm older, I can help at the office like Mama does." "When you're much older," I emphasized, catching Enzo's amused expression. "But I can learn now," she insisted, "about art and history and how to tell if things are real." "That's true," Enzo conceded. "Learning can start anytime. Doing the actual work requires more maturity." "Then I'll be mature," Elena declared with the absolute confidence of a 4-year-old, making us both laugh. The Tokyo project moved forward, and we decided to make it a family adventure as originally discussed. 6 months in Tokyo, then returning to Milan for 6 months, alternating for the duration of the project. Elena would attend an international school. We'd immerse ourselves in Japanese culture, and the entire family would grow from the experience. "Are we crazy?" I asked Enzo the night before our first departure for Tokyo. "Uprooting a 4-year-old, managing a business across continents, attempting to curate an entire museum wing while parenting?" "Completely crazy," he agreed cheerfully. "But we've never done anything the conventional way. Why start now? Because conventional is safer? Conventional is boring." He pulled me against him, his arms secure and certain around me. "And we're many things, Mia. But boring isn't one of them." Tokyo was everything we'd hoped. Challenging, exciting, overwhelming, and absolutely perfect. Elena thrived in the international school environment. The museum work pushed us professionally in new ways, and being together as a family in a completely different culture somehow strengthened our bonds rather than straining them. "She's happy," I observed one evening, watching Elena play with new friends in our temporary apartment's common area. "She is," Enzo agreed. "And so are you. I can see it." He was right. Despite the challenges, despite being far from home, despite the constant juggling of responsibilities, I was happy. We were happy. Because we had what mattered, each other. On the 1-year anniversary of our Tokyo project, I discovered I was pregnant again. The news was both surprising and welcome. Life continuing to evolve in ways we couldn't quite predict, but could absolutely embrace. "A son," Enzo said when we learned the baby's gender. "A son to go with our daughter. We're building quite the family, Signora Lombardi." "We are," I agreed, my hand resting on my growing belly. "And it's perfect. All of it." The baby arrived on a spring morning in Milan. We'd returned for the birth, wanting him to be born in the same hospital as his sister. Marco, we named him, after my cousin who'd unknowingly sparked everything with a simple photograph at a charity gala. Elena was besotted with her baby brother, wanting to help with everything despite being only 5. "He's ours," she kept saying with possessive delight. "Our Marco." "Yes," I agreed, watching Enzo hold his son with the same wonder he'd shown when holding Elena for the first time. "Ours." 10 years after that fateful Instagram post, we'd built an empire, professional and personal. Lombardi and Reyes was internationally recognized. Our children were thriving. Our marriage had weathered challenges and celebrated triumphs. And through it all, that photograph remained on our nightstand, a reminder of where we'd started. Of the moment jealousy had forced honesty, of the defiance that had sparked everything. "Do you ever regret it?" I asked Enzo one night, the question coming from nowhere and everywhere. "Any of it? Loving you? Building this life? Having our children?" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Never. Not for a single moment." Even the hard parts, the complications, the nights you barely sleep because Marco is teething and Elena has nightmares and work never stops? And especially those parts. He pulled me close, our bodies fitting together with the ease of a decade together. "Because those are the parts that matter, Mia. The messy, complicated, exhausting, absolutely beautiful parts. That's not despite our life. That is our life. And I wouldn't trade it for anything." "Not even for simplicity?" "Simple is overrated." His lips brushed my temple. "We're extraordinary. That's so much better." And he was right. We were extraordinary, not despite the complications, but because of them. Because we'd chosen the difficult path, the honest path, the path that required constant work and unwavering commitment. We were the couple who'd started with an Instagram post and built a legacy. The couple who'd transformed jealousy into partnership. The couple who chose each other every day, through every challenge. And that photograph that had almost been deleted? It remained exactly where it had always been. On our nightstand. The first thing we saw each morning, and the last thing we saw each night. A reminder that the best things in life often start with defiance. With refusal to comply with demands that don't serve your truth. With the courage to push back and force honesty even when it's terrifying. The photograph that changed everything. Our beginning. Our always.